Hi, this is Bruce, and today we're going to look at manipulating time graphs and how to use time graphs to analyze your data. So we've got a group of log files up here in our workspace, and let's go ahead and just look at the first one. And if you right-click on a parameter, you get a list of ways to look at your view or your data. So we're going to look at time graph here. When time graph pops up, this is from the start of the log file or the start of the measure to the end, and we do have time located here at the bottom. To add additional parameters, you just left click, drag, and drop, and when you let go, it drops away. So there's this is sort of an easy way to look at the distribution or the how these different parameters change over the course of your drive. So here we've got a spike up. To zoom in and to zoom out, so if I want to look at this particular value a little in more detail, what I'll do is I'll left click and I will drag to the right and then unclick, and that's my zoom. And that's from this icon right here, which is the zoom. You'll see it's got a little blue around it. So again, if I want to zoom in, I left click, drag to the right, and zoom out, and now I get a zoom level of that particular time space. If I want to zoom out, I left click and drag to the left, and that'll zoom out a little bit more. Or if I go to the R, which is zoom all, I get the whole space again. Let's take a minute, we'll zoom in again. This little icon, this hand, is your panning button. So now my left click becomes a pan to the left or pan to the right. So it keeps the zoom level the same, but it moves for me in that space. These little icons, if you turn them on and off, they'll give you the average for what's in the current grid. You can do min-max here. Now the other interesting thing you could start doing is when you layer different parameters for different measures. So for example, let's go ahead and click on the second measure, second measure here. I'm going to take the RSRP, drag and drop it into my grid, and it will pop up. So I've got my RSRP now here. But what's interesting is if I want to compare it to perhaps the first RSRP of the first channel. So I'm going to right click, and this time I'm going to merge. And it asks me which of these I want to merge. I want to merge all of the RSRPs together. So now the black line is my first measure, and the blue comes from my second. So we see that the values will correlate or follow each other. There's a little section right up in here where the two diverge. So it'd be interesting to go understand why. Two phones could have been on different channels. There could be a lot of different reasons for that. So let's zoom out. So that was the merge. If I want to unmerge, I could go back and just split them out again. And maybe I'll just go ahead and get rid of that to begin with. So let's look at the block option next. The block option is this second icon. Now when I click and I drag to the right, it's going to create a big yellow space, and what it's doing is it's blocking out the data, and that's going to be important if I want to create measures from within a space. So let's say I just want to really deeply analyze this time zone. I want to figure out exactly why this drop occurred, perhaps right here. And this log file might be too large to really import all of the data associated with it. So I create a block of data, and then what I can do is I can create a measure. And first there's a block option, which is within the block or out of the block. Within the block says I want to create a measure or create a new a log file, new data set from within the block or from outside of the block. So we'll say within the block, I'm going to create a measure. It's going to ask me which of these measures up here do I want to look at. Well, these are actually merged log files. We talked about that in one of the earlier quick start videos. So these are the individual measures that happen. So I'm going to create the measure based on just the first two, these channel 1 that's here. And it's going to create a new measure called intra, and it's got a timestamp, but I could say maybe I'll say quick start test, something like that. So from these two log files, it's going to go and extract out and create a new measure. So you'll see it's going to read through it. First one is pretty small. Second one might take just a little bit longer. So after it's made the log file, it's starting to import that data again. So it's thinking, and once it's done, it gets put there into the workspace for us. So there we go. Here's our new measure that's pulled out of this one, and this one becomes important. This was imported with the same import options that we had before, which we had set to 1 second. But perhaps I want to instead just import all the data at much finer granularity to really study what was going on in that area. So that would have been an option that I could have done. So that's the block option. So let's go ahead and clear the block. Go ahead and clear all of that. Clear all the blocks if you want to. There's quite a few options. Again, if you right click, these ones down here will help you in the environment. One of them might be show attribute group name, and you'll see that just removed the names, or kind of showed you the menu tree option. So go back there and I can turn that one on. Show attribute group name. There's quite a few other different options here about let's see, I showed that one. Vertical line, you can change the lines and things. If you go into options here, you could start to change colors associated with different graphs if you want to. So I'll turn that one red. That suddenly becomes red. Again, right click, go to options, and this will give you different ways to change colors or change point sizes, line widths, things like that. If you go down to graph configuration, this is where you'll get a lot more flexibility into changing things like your axes. So maybe I want to change, right now you'll see it set to minimum of 26 to 4. So right now the minimum and the maximum. Maybe I want to change that from 4 to -2, like that. So now my left axis just changed its scale for it. So you can change the bottom axis, you can change titles and all sorts of formats. So each of these different graphs has the ability to edit that piece around with it. So that was graph configuration. The last thing to look at is export options. So this is one that we use a lot because it allows us to take the data out of LMA and put it into PowerPoints or Word. So hit export, and if you want, you can export it to a JPEG, or if you stick it on the clipboard, and I'll put all of them, and all means all 3 of these. And then if we go ahead and just open up a quick PowerPoint, and I'll open up a blank presentation here. We'll change the layout here to blank. Now I just have to right click and paste, and I've got my graph ready for me in my presentation. So that's how you export views out of your analysis. All right, we'll take a look at different ways to manipulate LMA in the next video, particularly around statistics charts.